ever heard a song and thought, I wish I could play that? Hi, my name is Bailey, and I've been playing guitar for a few years now. I still remember what it felt like to be a complete beginner. My very first guitar wasn't even mine, it was my dad's. It was older, a little broken, and way too big for me. I remember trying to wrap my arms around it and struggling to be able to, but that guitar was my starting point. And it taught me something important. Learning guitar is all about taking things one step at a time. Today, I'm going to tell you what those steps are. If you can do 3 things, pick the right guitar, learn some basic chords, and keep your guitar in tune, you will be well on your way to playing your first song. So, the first step is choosing a guitar that fits you. Guitars aren't one size fits all. There are multiple kinds. So there are classic guitars, which have nylon strings, which is kind of a form of plastic. They're softer and will be a lot easier on your fingers. They produce a more mellow and soft sound. Then there are acoustic guitars, which is the one that I have now. These have steel strings, which are rougher on your fingers and harder to press down on. Then there are electric guitars. These guitars are probably going to be the easiest to press down on, but are, going to have more things that go with them, like amps, pedals, whatever. So whenever you choose that, you're going to be spending more money. And then there's the size. So a smaller guitar is better for smaller people, younger people like me. So whenever you're choosing your guitar, you want to look at the size first. So for me, the smaller guitars are going to fit younger people or people with shorter arms, but your bigger guitars are going to be better for you if you have longer arms. So I learned the hard way that, guitars can be too big for you because of my dad's guitar. It made it almost impossible to strum comfortably. When I finally got my own smaller guitar, the difference was crazy. So when you're picking a guitar, think about comfort first. If it feels good in your hands, you're gonna wanna play it more. Then the second step is learning chords. A chord is a group of notes played together. There are easy ones like E minor, which only require 2 fingers. And there are harder ones like bar chords, which require you to put your finger across multiple strings and play that, which I still have not learned bar chords yet. Well, I can do them, but I'm not very good at them. So the biggest challenge isn't learning a chord, it's trying to learn how to switch between them comfortably. When I first tried to move from a G chord to a C chord, it was really complicated, but after practicing slowly over and over again, I eventually got it. And then, whenever you're playing the guitar, one of the most useful tools you can use is a capo. This is going to clamp across several strings and raise the pitch. So, you can play the same chord shapes in different keys. It means you can play along with more songs without having to learn a bunch of new chords. And then the last step is tuning. No matter how well you play, if your guitar is out of tune, it's not going to sound good. There are a few ways to do it. Free tuning apps, which is what I use. And then there are clip-on tuners, which can go on the headstock or in the sound hole. And then eventually, once you play long enough, you can tune by ear. So the standard guitar tuning is E, A, D, G, B, and E from lowest string to highest. When you're starting out, tuning before every practice session is important. Not only does it make your guitar sound better, it also helps you learn what the correct notes sound like. So, when you're playing guitar, there are a lot of struggles that can come with it. You might be thinking, the guitar sounds too hard, or what about when my fingers start to hurt? Or what if I can't switch chords fast enough? And the thing is, that's normal. Yes, your fingertips will hurt until calluses build up, but all of those challenges mean you're on the right track. So, finally, to start playing guitar, you need to pick a guitar that feels right for you, learn some basic chords, and keep your guitar in tune. That's it, 3 steps. Now, here's my challenge to you. If you've ever thought about playing guitar, don't just keep thinking about it. Try it. Go to a music store, pick up your first guitar, and get familiar with the feeling of it, and maybe even learn your first chord there. The point is, you don't have to wait until you're ready or good enough. every guitarist starts at the beginning. So, if you've ever dreamed of playing a song on the guitar, I encourage you to start the process, because the sooner you begin, the sooner you'll reach that incredible moment where you play a song you love and think, I'm really doing this. Are there any questions?
What's the wider application of this situation?
I would honestly just say music, because it's like a worldwide thing.
Okay, so if you can,
I guess just playing the guitar.
two things. If you can learn to play the guitar, then you can learn to do
Okay.
what? What else can you learn? Anything.
Because once you play the guitar, it kind of helps you with learning how to multitask, like strumming and doing chords at the same time. So
Okay, that's what I was going for, some
Yeah, okay.
wider thing. And then also the other levels of music and how important it is for us to stay creative and the way that music enriches our brain and all of that. So at the end of your speech, you always want to go global if you can.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else? All right, let's give her a hand. Okay, Cooper, let's see what you have.
Good morning, guys. What I'll be talking about today is steps to a better financial future. Why is it so important to save money? Life is very unpredictable, and there are going to be things that come like flat tires or emergencies that you're going to need to have money to the side for. One thing that I was taught when I was young is the 25 rule, which is setting your check up in 25% predicaments. The first one being savings, the next emergency funds, the next investments, and then a daily spending. Something that's very important to start you off for a good financial future is long-term investments, something that's going to appreciate over time. I know that right now it's very popular in our generation for like cards, like trading cards. So if you can look at a guy that was good in college and get his rookie card, it'll appreciate over time and you'll get value off of that. And then one thing that's very major is learning how to play trends. With our generation, I feel like when something comes out, everybody has to have it, the younger generation. So if you can learn how to play that and see what's going to be popular next or what's growing, you can kind of make some money off of that. And then what is a good investment? A good investment is something that you can buy and flip and make money in the long term. Like I said last time, you can invest in stocks. Sometimes it's profitable, but for the most time, it's going to be a long time thing that you have to put money in over time. Something that's also very important, which I learned after spending a lot of money and not really knowing where money is going, and then have you guys ever looked in your account and saw like $20 was gone, and then you guys have no idea where it went, like a subscription or something? So tracking finances is very important. There's apps that you can look at. I like to just check my bank app on the daily and see like if I have a subscription that took money away and if I'm still using that. So that's very, very important. Something that we can look at when we go on our investments is ROI, which is return on investment. So it's how much you put in versus how you get out. You kind of want to get 50% back. So if you put in $100, you'll want to get $50 out of that. And that's something that you can look at to build your financial resume. And so today I've gone over the 25 rule, ROI, steps to a better financial future through each check. So I hope that guys can help you. And kind of the thing over all this is we all spend money, we all make money. So it's very important to track that into the future and just kind of help us be set up. So do you guys have any questions?
Anybody have any questions? No? Okay, let's give him a hand. I could have dragged you out on your global context there, but I think you did all right. Okay. All right, we have reached the end of the process analysis sequence. That was a speech to get you in the frame of mind of being able to teach people how to do something and the steps necessary to be able to teach someone how to do something. We're at the midway point in the semester. So if this were the old days, we'd have fall break this week, but we don't have fall break, or we don't here. A lot of high schools have it and some other schools have it. But what you'll appreciate is when we get to Thanksgiving, you have 9 days off. So that's the trade-off here. And this is the point in the semester where everybody starts to get a little bit tired. You've been going at it for 8 weeks. You got 4 or 5 classes. You're trying to deal with everything that's going on in your living environment. Many of you have jobs, so there's a lot going on. So we're turning a corner here from here's who I am and here's what I do and here's what I like to do and here's how I can teach you to do it, to a little more elevated thinking. This is where we switch into the persuasive speech, sometimes known as the argumentative speech. And this is where topics can come up that can be challenging, and they should be challenging. If somebody in here doesn't raise your blood pressure a little bit, then we haven't done our job. Because we want to get you thinking about things that maybe you haven't thought about before. Now, that's not to say that we're going to solve every socio-cultural issue in the world, every economic issue, every political issue, every religious issue, every geographic issue, every environmental issue. We're not going to do that. But this should be a subject that matters to you and you care something about. And what do they always say? Don't talk about it Thanksgiving. Politics and religion. Why? Because everybody has a different feeling about politics and religion. Everybody thinks differently, and everybody should. We're supposed to have different feelings. In the college environment, we should come into contact with information that we've never heard before that makes us think new things. That's the hallmark of an educated person, is being able to hear something, read something, learn something, see something contrary to your entire experience, and it changed your mind a little bit. You think something new. You've come to a new place. So here in a television environment, of course I have to be extra cautious because we're broadcasting and any of the public could be watching. So anything that we say, if it's not taken in the proper context, can be taken out of context. And nobody wants to get in trouble. I don't want to get in trouble. I like my job. And it's a very odd time that we're going through here socioculturally, where people tell on each other for bringing up ideas, thoughts, or concepts that are contrary to some prevailing idea. The tricky thing in the college environment is we're not supposed to talk about our own political points of view outside of the context of a lesson. So I can't come in and just start railing on whoever it is I don't like and whatever it is they're doing that I don't like if I don't have a reason. But if I do have a reason, meaning it's in the context of the lesson, then my academic freedom gives me abilities to speak truth to power, so to speak. What's speaking truth to power mean? What's that phrase mean? Speaking truth to power. Well, everybody should know that one. That's when you're willing to speak up against forces that you believe are more powerful than you are. It's your responsibility. It's our responsibility as Americans to speak up. There is a prevailing political wind right now that says we shouldn't speak up. And if we don't go right along with what the dominant thinking is, then we should either be quiet or change our minds and not think that way. So, it's always interesting to me to go into this because I want you to talk about things that you really care about. So, we often talk about subjects worth arguing. Is peanut butter and jelly better than peanut butter and banana sandwiches? No? Dave, you say no? Well, we're getting ready to have a throwdown here because I think peanut butter and banana sandwiches are where it's happening. We don't really have to argue about that kind of stuff. Actually, I created my own snack out of peanut butter, banana, and tortillas. So you take a tortilla and you put the peanut butter on that, and you put the banana right in the middle, and you roll it up, and it's like a burrito. So I call it a PBBB. That's peanut butter and banana burrito. They're really good. Okay. So, but that's not very controversial. We're really not going to start throwing hands over the differences between peanut butter sandwich. But what if I challenge you, let's say you have a religious perspective. Let's say you have a Christian perspective. And I challenged you on the Bible that you use. And I argue that the Bible that you use is invalid. What do you mean? The Bible's invalid. Okay, well now we're in a challenging area. If you don't know Bible history, you probably lose your argument. So if you don't know where the first Bible comes from and what language it was in, how many books there were, and you're reading one that's in English and is missing a bunch of those books, then you're not using a valid Bible. Okay, now we're in argument land. Now we're in persuasive speech land. Politics does this every day, makes thesis statements about sensitive subjects. So I just noticed yesterday they're eliminating the Office of Special Education in the rapidly shrinking Department of Education at the federal level. Is this a good idea? How many people do you know anyone who's ever been a special education student? Who's ever had what's known as an IEP? Some of you may even had one. What's that? An individual educational plan for someone who has alternative learning needs. So they want to get rid of that. Well, I'd say that's a point of argument. I don't think we should get rid of that. But that's my opinion. So when we start to talk about subjects, I'm going to go to the computer screen, if we can. Let's bring up an argument that I've gone through a few times. And I'm going to bring this over here, and we'll put this on the front screen too, Reagan. Once you get that going, I'll take off on it. So when we do an argument, how do we do it? Why do we do it? What makes it important? Here's a subject that's come up several times over several years. And I've worked in this area, and so I created this talk so I could talk about this subject, which is American Indian sports mascots, like the Catoosa Indians, for example. So what's at stake here? 1 in 5 public school students in Oklahoma is of American Indian heritage. We have over 350,000 American Indian students in Oklahoma public schools. Race-based nicknames teach all children that stereotyping is acceptable in society, grouping everyone under one big concept. So, to make an argument, we need a thesis. We need topic plus opinion plus controlling ideas. So my topic is American Indian mascots. My opinion is they should be removed from non-Indian public schools because the mascots stereotype all Native people as one monolithic race. What's that mean? Saying, well, everybody in here that's Asian is just Asian from the same place. But we know that's not true. Why do we know that's not true? Because we have Vietnam, we have Hmong. And I noticed a TV presentation on the Hmong Festival this weekend. I thought of you, Chia, when I saw that. It was on TV. It was like Hmong Festival this weekend. So, same in the Native American world. So here in Oklahoma, it's complicated because there's, 38 federally recognized tribes. But they don't all come from the same place. They all have a lot of differences. But these mascots teach that all Native people are just the same. They trivialize significant cultural traditions, that reinforce offensive racial terms, and encourage anti-Indian imagery. Here's what's interesting. The research indicates that the mascots not only diminish the self-esteem of Native students, specifically the children that are going to school and that are exposed to these mascots, but the acceptance and promotion of these mascots by Native adults often concurs with a lack of investment or knowledge on their own part of their own Native heritage. The research shows this. The less you know, the more you like them. And it typically comes down to whether you're connected to Indian country or the Native world or not. If you're not, they're cool. And if you are, they typically are not. But there are a lot of different points of view on this subject. And this is why it's important to do an argument that has multiple sides, multiple points of view. Some Native people could care less about this. They don't want to even hear about it anymore. Some Native people are still very activist-oriented about it. Some non-Native people really like their Native mascots and want to keep them because they make them feel good. Others understand the psychology of it and want to get rid of them. So there's 4 different points of view in just 2 different groups. So we have to be able to think about this thing in multiple contexts. What does any of our identity amount to? It's the language we speak, it's the ceremony or annual events that we attend, and it's the community responsibility that we have. That community that we're responsible to. We're either part of that community or we're not. And sometimes Native reality is hard for the wider public to grasp because we typically aren't in those environments. It's my son there with his big mouth open right in the center. So Oklahoma makes things very complicated because of the diversity here. And a lot of times the Native American image is celebrated here and used as a tourist item. Typically what we see are the teepees. Not all Native people lived in teepees, just to start with. And we're not going to do a whole history here, but we know the Caddo and the Wichita people lived in big grass houses that were permanent settlements. They weren't the mobile teepees of the Plains people who needed these teepees so they could move from place to place during the seasons or in following the buffalo. Never mind the southeastern people who come here from Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana. They're removed here by force in the 1800s, what's sometimes known as the Trail of Tears. And those people have a whole different way of worshiping than the powwow environment. So the southeastern people are what we call stomp dance people, or ceremonies that are linked to the fire. Plains people are scary. They're feared. They're the other of the 1800s, 19th century that are the opposition to American expansionism west. So let's see if you know where this comes from. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. Where does this quote come from? That's the Declaration of Independence. So our founding documents call Native people savages. So we shouldn't be surprised when we have high schools that name their sports teams savages today, because it's buried into our national consciousness. Native people are very diverse in the state of Oklahoma and nationwide, with almost roughly 500 tribes across the United States. In the 19th century, the reservation era is where Native people are corralled up and put on reservations against their wills. Children are sent to federal boarding schools where they're punished for speaking their tribal languages. Tribal lands are broken up and people are enrolled, and then lands are allotted to them. And then in Oklahoma statehood, tribal governments are abolished. This happened within a very short amount of time in the 1800s, up to 1907. In the 20th century, Native people now for 100 years have had citizenship in the United States. Prior to 1924, did not have citizenship, even though they're born here. We see American Indians serve with distinction. We call them the code talkers sometimes. The Indian Reorganization Act, which allowed tribes to reorganize after tribal governments were abolished in 1907. They were able to get back together, reincorporate, become federally recognized. The Johnson-O'Malley Act created educational resources for Native children. In the 1950s, there was another move to get rid of tribes during the termination era. So the tribes are tribes, now they're not tribes, now they're back to being tribes again, now they're not tribes anymore, which happened in a really short amount of time. In the 1960s and 70s, the American Indian movement comes along and says, wait a minute, we need to change some stuff, and brought some social awareness to Native issues. As a result of that, we get the Indian Self-Determination Act, which allowed tribes to reorganize and decide what they wanted to do. for themselves. A multitude of federal programs come in. Won't go through all these, but what's NAGPRA? Native American Graves Repatriation and Protection Act. That protects Native American graves from being looted, which have been looted since the Europeans first arrived because the perception was there was valuable things in there. Why is all this important? Because it's the history that sets up this argument. Archaeological Resources Protection Act, the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, Indian Child Welfare Act, the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. These were all acts meant to protect Native resources and Native people. The economic development and impact of tribes in this state alone is over $1 billion. And the tribes are one of the highest employment elements in the state, along with the tribal colleges that have been developing. Okay, so let's talk then about this imagery. So you have a little bit of history. The authentic imagery is that made by First Nations people. Stereotypical imagery is typically made by non-Indians, representing only one image of Native people. And then there's the commercial. That's positive and negative American Indian imagery representing business enterprises. Jeep Cherokee, for example. The Cherokee don't get any money out of that. Institutional imagery, stereotypical or authentic imagery of schools, government, and the military. Could talk a lot about that. But then there's the downright racist and insensitive. Those are degrading images that depict Native American people in a demeaning light. In American popular culture, Native people have been throughout. This is from 1923. There really isn't an Oklahoma Indian jazz style. There are some Native people who play jazz. We see images like this in Oklahoma City, this whole cowboy and Indian duality. Then you get into what we consider commercial stereotypes. Not all Native people wore war bonnets. Typically just Plains people wore war bonnets. Cherokee people didn't. Muskogee people didn't. Choctaw people didn't. People from the Great Lakes region did not. It was Great Lakes people. But that is the image we tend to see the most, is the stereotype of the Plains Indian. A lot of people don't really even think about this because it's not part of their world. We see these images all the time that pop up out of nowhere. So here's George Custer, Colonel George Custer, who was in this, they had an element of him in the film Night at the Museum, and so this was a Happy Meal. And so this went across the country. And so imagine you're a Native person whose people interacted with Custer in a negative way, and you get a Happy Meal, and there's Custer popping out of your Happy Meal. Well, corporate people don't really think about this too much. You also see the images from a liquor store where you have the war bonnet Native person with the bottle upturned playing on the trope of the drunk Native person. The idea of tribes and Native people being savages. Well, let's just put that up there because we're going to butcher people, because that's what the Declaration of Independence says that Native people did. Are we making too much out of this? Is it just team spirit? Is it just fun? Does it make any difference whatsoever? Is it too woke to consider someone else's feelings and how they think about things? When we see these images, this is very current for me, although this image is from the 1990s. These were Palestinian people dressed up in Native American stereotypical environment. It says, "The Indian wars are not over, Mrs. Rice. We're still here too." And what are they saying? The people of Palestine, who were there first, had their country carved up and made into the state of Israel after World War II. And then that gave Jews from Europe, who'd already been wiped out for 6 million of them, a place to go. But they didn't really care what the Palestinians had to say about it. So the Palestinians have always felt like an oppressed people. And if you noticed yesterday, hostages were released finally. It's been a 2-year war between Palestinians and Israelis that's destroyed Gaza. And I know some of you don't know too much about that, but this has been a very significant story over the last couple of years. But here you see internationally the perspective of using the Native American stereotype to illustrate the negative way in which people are being treated. Now, of course, here in Oklahoma, we see these same images all the time, especially with regard to high school athletics. And it is humorous to dress up like a Native person and goof around. Now, of course, we also have sports teams. Now, the one on the left is gone. The Washington Pro Football Team no longer exists as a Native American mascot. In the middle, that was the Cleveland image. That's gone now too. The one on the right is a hockey logo, the Blackhawks. And what's the difference between the Blackhawks and either the Indians or the R word for Redskins? Blackhawk was a real person, number one. Number two, Chicago is where the Sac and Fox people were. On top of that, the Sac and Fox have a liaison between them and the Chicago Blackhawks, and they interact and make sure that whatever Chicago wants to do is within what the Sac and Fox approve of. And just 2 summers ago, I think it was, the Chicago Blackhawks helped the Sac and Fox get a Black Hawk helicopter, a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter, moved it down to the tribal facility down there south of Stroud, mounted it as part of their veterans display. So it's different when you're talking about a real person and a real name and just stereotypes. Ethnic epithets. Are they good or bad? How many of you walk around and just call somebody the N-word? Probably not any of you. Hopefully. Would we use a slang term for anybody from China? Nope. Would we use a slang term for a Jew? Nope. Would we use a slang term for a Latino or Latina person? Nope. Would we use the N-word for a black person? Nope. But we'll still use the word Redskins, which goes back to 1699. Even as early as 2009, Redskin is considered a slang term used as a disparaging term for a Native American. But we still have public schools in Oklahoma that use that word. It's gone from the national level now. It's kind of fading away. Have you ever seen this? Let's go back to when Redskins were bounties, where states awarded money for dead Native people. That's why Native people don't want to see Redskins. What also happens is you engender violent phraseology. So these are supposed to be spirit posters and spirit signs that you see as a poster on the wall, scalp the Redskins. Or this written on a pavement, scalp the Indians. And then, because you probably don't know a lot about the Native world, the eagle is considered a very important element of the Native American environment. And so here you see an image from a high school t-shirt where there's an eagle about to scalp a chief. So it's not just the stereotypical imagery. It's not just the misrepresentation of Native people. Now we're creating violent imagery against Native people, and this impacts little kids. We're not even talking about y'all. You're all over 18, 19, you can think what you want. But this is what our 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds are exposed to in their public schools. It engenders this kind of concept. Let's send them home on another trail of tears. This is, 11 years ago. Because what are we really concerned about here? Kids. So my son's Native. I've got lots of little Native nieces and nephews. When this subject matter came up, I thought this would be an important thing for us to talk about. A lot of kids do know the difference. Those children who grow up in a Native environment, they grow up in the Pala environment, ceremonial environment, around other Native people, they know the difference between what's real and what's not real. Northeastern changed, where they're the Riverhawks now, and this used to be their image. There was a public school over in Stillwell that had a lot of Native people on their school board, and they approved this particular mascot. Approved it. Even though I had some students in my class who went to those schools and said the students did get a choice in it at all. We would not say this is a positive representation of Native people. So the real research, and when you get into arguing, you want to have something that's real. Stephanie Freiberg, a psychologist, did a study in which she learned American Indians who approve of race-based mascots are in a certain sense the greatest victims, because her research shows that Native people who approve incur a greater amount of psychological harm than those who oppose them. Additionally, non-Indians or non-Natives experience a boost in their self-esteem when they have a race-based mascot, as opposed to American Indians who largely have a loss of self-esteem when they have a race-based mascot. We tried to get some work in the Oklahoma legislature, hasn't worked. We wanted early on just to get rid of Redskins and Savages. Savages are still around. 2 Redskins have gone away, Tulsa Union and Capitol Hill High School in Oklahoma City. The NCAA in 2005 said if you're an NCAA school, you can't even have one unless you have a namesake tribe that's willing to endorse you. That's why the Florida Seminoles get to keep theirs, the Eastern Michigan Chippewas, the Utah Utes. But if you're just Indians, warriors, savages, chiefs, etc., those had to go. So here's where I get into advocating for change. The state of Oklahoma requires teaching about famous people of history and their accomplishments when it comes to Anglo-Americans, meaning those of European American descent, and African Americans. However, the state encourages teaching about what happened to Native people in the 19th century without even giving them a leader or any kind of response. So I say some of these things because I've looked into it. Here's what they want you to do in the 11th grade high school. Compare and contrast social attitudes and federal policies toward Native American peoples and actions of the U.S. Army, missionaries, and settlers during the settlement of the American West, 1850 to 1890. Here's what history did to the people, as opposed to this one. Identify the contributions of political leaders like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Thurgood Marshall, Cesar Chavez. Major issues and scandals, including the Watergate scandal, and major trends in national elections. So now we're talking people. And that's why I like to bring up Standing Bear. Anybody know what tribe he was from? Ponca. Big statue of him by Ponca City. Why is he so important? Without telling the whole story, because I don't have time, Standing Bear and his people were forcibly removed to Indian Territory. And the conditions were not the same here as they were in Nebraska. Hot, climate was different. They didn't have access really to the best environment, and so a lot started to be sick and die. Standing Bear's son got sick and was going to die and asked his father, when I die, will you take me back to our old burial ground around the Niobrara River in Nebraska? Standing Bear said, sure. He does. Gets up there, then what happens? He gets arrested and put in prison, Army prison. And they say, well, what's up? Why can't I go where I want to? They say, well, you're a ward of the state. You're basically a prisoner. I'm like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't make sense. So through an interpreter, they went to court. There's a famous trial called the Trial of Standing Bear. And what did it say? That an Indian is a person within the meaning of the laws of the United States. Why'd they have to say that? Because at that time, Native people weren't thought to be persons, people. Neither were African American people. So a judge had to say that Standing Bear is covered by the U.S. Constitution, which previous to that moment, they didn't think that he was. That's 1874, just 50 years before Natives became citizens. So Ponca Chief Standing Bear may be considered one of the country's first civil rights leader, and his trial potentially the first civil rights case. But we don't see that in our public schools. I'm happy to say that I got to know Wilma Mankiller, who was the first woman principal chief of Cherokee Nation, and she was an awesome person. She's deceased now. But people should learn about her, especially kids. So what's the broader context? Remember, I'm always looking for the global application of this, of understanding and contextualizing contemporary images of racial or ethnic conflict. And here's where we get to this. The intellectual, critical thinking skills involved in contextualization and discussion of difficult and controversial issues helps teach future leaders, which is you all, to manage large groups or organizations with diverse opinions and backgrounds. We have to be able to teach people. It's my good friend Dr. Pete Koser, who was giving a lecture one day, and I used him as my teaching image. Even in Oklahoma, our law is set up, but this has never been tried. Every person has, subject to the qualifications and restrictions provided by law, the right of protection from bodily restraint or harm, from personal insult or defamation, and from injury to his personal relations. There's a law set up for this. What are the benefits of change? Understanding different perspectives and compromises necessary between them for a peaceful environment helps us make informed choices that benefit the most people that live in the environment where we work and exist. But what about the minority? What about those who feel left out? What about those who say, hey, the mascots are a good deal for me, I like them? Well, how about some compromises? While a large number of educational, medical, religious, legislative, and tribal entities have publicly asked for the removal of American Indian mascots, from non-Indian educational organizations, schools continue using the images. So, how about we stop using stereotypical cartoon-like caricatures, stop the tomahawk chop and other fake Indian antics, prevent schools from creating anti-Indian imagery, especially the violent stuff, when playing a team with the mascot. Encourage using only a team's town name when referring to it in school-related media and public address systems. And also changing the whole way we think about this, race-based sports nicknames. These are important perspectives for us. To be able to understand these subjects are significant. They do impact our world, and they impact our children and how they learn. So let's go with a race-based athletic policy that targets American Indian students. It's an educational civil rights issue. Counter false impressions that educational environments can retain mascots without harm. You can't, and it's a wider example of stereotypes. So we're back to the thesis. When you're making your argument, American Indian mascots should be removed from non-Indian public schools because they perpetuate stereotypes that all Native people are the same, typically manifested by Plains Indian imagery. They make light of significant and sometimes sacred images, icons, music, and other cultural elements of First Nations people. They use pejorative terms such as redskins and savages to depict Native people, and they encourage harmful and violent imagery toward Native people. So, if we were to see these images, these were created by an RSU student for a capstone project, by the way. So if Muslims were depicted in this way with a picture of Osama bin Laden and crossed rifles, would that go? Probably not in our state. Would somebody like the kamikazes, the strong, very brave Japanese pilots who flew their airplanes into World War II ships? Probably wouldn't go very far here. Well, how about the White Knights and use a Klan with a cross behind it? Probably wouldn't go very far. What if we create Touchdown Jesus for the Christians? Wouldn't go very far. So, we have had some changes. Capitol Hill changed in 2014. Tulsa Union changed in 2021. And future leaders know how to discuss this issue in Native and non-Native environments, but also it should serve as a framework or example, a paradigm for how you discuss any significant issue that's important to you. Now, it's not only me. Let's see if this goes how it should. So these are the stories from just the last couple months. Look at what's right at the top. Tulsa Public Schools bans discriminatory imagery but fate of Central Webster mascots undecided. So right now in the city of Tulsa, they're trying to figure out what to do with their other high schools that have Native imagery. And you can go all the way down New York school changes. Rapid City apologizes to Native American families. Sanitizing American Indian history doesn't change the truth. How one Long Island school district became the epicenter of Trump's fight to preserve Native American sports mascots. So there's lots of stories here going on. You can come all the way back to me, Reagan. So you can get that other thing off the screen at this time. Yeah, I think you got on the big one back here. Just put me there, the other way, just me. Okay, well, I'll let it just sit. There you go. Okay, so what I want to do today was show you an argument. This argument came out of A, being part of Native family, and then secondly, being academic and teaching, and we're always looking for good subjects to discuss. This is a tough one. It's still ongoing. It's been going on for a long time. But we are in an era where thankfully the woke term is sort of fading. People are like, realize that's a gone issue now. What does woke mean? You're informed. You're educated. We used to say politically correct, but even that doesn't hold water anymore. You're educated. When you understand perhaps how someone else feels, you can empathize with them. And remember, I talked about this before, the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy is when you walk up to a hole and somebody's down in the hole and they're stuck, you just go, well, sorry, you fell in that hole, and you take off. Empathy is, sorry you fell in that hole, let me go get a ladder or a rope and help you get out of there. Let me try and understand your situation and help you through it. So when we make these persuasive essays, it should be something that's important to you. On Wednesday, what we're going to do is I have another presentation that I'll do. I don't lecture too much in here. I really want you all to do the speeches and get critiques and keep moving. So on Wednesday, what we'll do is we'll look at the structure of your persuasive speech and your argument, and then you can start to think about what you're going to plug into it. So what I would also say is it's important to look at the current stories of today. Let's go back to the computer for a second, if you don't mind. We've got 1:48 left. And as you know, I have emphasized one website that's a news aggregator called the Drudge Report. And what it does is keeps things up to date so you can follow what's happening in the world. And this is a big story today. These hostages are finally free. It took 2 years. When Hamas terrorists flew little helicopters across the border, killed a bunch of Jewish people in a settlement there, took a bunch hostage and dragged them back into Gaza, and have been holding them in underground tunnels for the last 2 years, which is why the Israelis have been bombing the bejesus out of them. But Gaza is in ruins, and we've never had that experience here of just all of a sudden our town being blown up. But I'll put all this down here. We're not going to go through it all right now, but this is a place where you can go and start to get some ideas about some things that are going on in our world. And you can come back to me, and I want to talk a little bit more about that. So, is crypto money a good investment? Should a woman have control over her body? Is one political party better at education than the other political party? Are you using the right Bible? Is religion even important? What kind of argument can you make that'll come from a passionate place within you that may change some of our minds about something? And frankly, the American Indian mascot issue didn't really matter to me until I got involved with a Native family. That changed my perspective. That's what education is about. It's being able to change your understanding and get to a new place. Okay, Wednesday we'll come back. We'll keep building your persuasive speeches. See you later.